Made up of order, Prime Minister.
I think you need to leave.
James cleverly launched one of his toughest attacks yet during Prime Minister's questions, accusing David Lammy of putting public safety at risk through Labour's early prisoner release policy. The heated exchange quickly escalated into accusations over dangerous offenders, victims' rights, policing, and Britain's criminal justice system. Let's break down exactly what happened. Before we begin, take a second to like this video and subscribe to Britain Talks Daily. Now, let's get into today's debate.
Will he apologise to the victims of the rapists, sexual predators and paedophiles that he is planning to release early?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm delighted to welcome the Shadow Housing Secretary to the dispatch box. He, of course, could have been doing this job every week if he were better with numbers. He's the Foreign Secretary. He was the Foreign Secretary in government that botched Brexit, the Home Secretary in a government that decimated neighbourhood policing, and one of the shortest-serving education secretaries in our history. Now, he asks about a very serious issue, and every decision we have taken has been based on public safety and delivering justice for victims. Let's talk about the context. The last Labour government built 28,000 prison places. We're building 14,000 by 2031. We've already delivered 3,200. Under the Tories, they closed 23 prisons. 23. Gloucester closed. Shrewsbury closed. Portsmouth closed. Holloway closed. Northallerton closed. And what are they now? A block of flats. That's why we have to have an early release scheme. That's why we passed the Sentencing Act. And we're putting community powers locally to make sure that we protect the public.
James cleverly opens aggressively by asking whether the government will apologise to victims affected by its early prisoner release policy. Rather than apologising, David Lammy responds by defending Labour's record on prison capacity while attacking the Conservatives for what he describes as years of underinvestment. Both sides immediately frame the debate around public safety, with the opposition focusing on victims and Labour arguing that today's challenges stem largely from decisions made under previous governments.
Sir James cleverly.
Mr. Speaker, he makes a joke about the use of figures. Let me give him a figure. 50,000 prisoners released early in just 2 years on his watch. And I am genuinely shocked, Mr. Speaker, that when given the opportunity to apologise to victims, he very publicly failed to do so. And let me remind him what this is about. Let me quote Fiona Goddard, herself a victim of grooming gangs, who has been brave and open about how his policy will impact her. And she says, "Finding out that they may be released early has completely set me back. I have barely left the house. I feel constantly anxious, frightened, and unsafe. I can barely sleep." This is the impact his policy is having on victims. He refuses to apologise. But why is he pursuing a policy which he must know is both wrong and dangerous?
This is a very serious issue, and the Honourable Gentleman is experienced in this House. He knows that while he was Home Secretary, they had an early release scheme that set out 10,000 offenders, 10,000 under his... They had 6 schemes within a year. They had a scheme that they announced on the 6th of June 2023, another scheme on the 17th of October 2023, another scheme on the 8th of March 2024, another in April, another in May, another in June, all before the election. And that's why Rishi Sunak, it's rumoured, called the election in the first place. They left a system with just 83 empty cells. That's what the Justice Secretary previous to me inherited when she came into office. That's why we had to pass the sentencing scheme. He hasn't said what they would do now to fix the system. Of course we think of every victim. And that's why we're notifying victims in discussion with all victims. I sat last week in my surgery with a victim of grooming gangs. All of us want to see offenders locked up. That's why we've got to have prison capacity.
The debate intensifies when James cleverly quotes a victim who says the possibility of offenders being released early has left her frightened and unable to feel safe. He argues that the government's policy risks undermining public confidence in the justice system. David Lammy responds by pointing out that previous Conservative governments also introduced early release schemes, claiming Labour inherited a prison system with virtually no spare capacity. Both sides accuse each other of creating the current crisis.
Sir James Cleverly.
Mr. Speaker, he talks about 10,000 early release over 14 years of Conservative government. They have released 50,000 in 2 years. And he knows it's wrong. He is a good man. He must know that it is wrong to release 5,000 serious criminals, including rapists, including paedophiles. And not only does he know it's wrong, but his party knows it's wrong. 400 Labour MPs and not one voted to support the government's policy in the vote last night. They know it's wrong. The country knows it's wrong, but he insists on pursuing it anyway. So if he will not change course, will he at least make this guarantee that not one rapist or paedophile will be released early later on this year?
He hasn't proposed what they would do if they were in office. They released 10,000 with 4 different schemes, no impact assessment when they released them, no victim contact when they released them, no warning. They did it on the slide. And let us be clear, yes, we've got more probation officers. They, of course, cut probation, decimated it because of Chris Grayling. We've invested £700 million in probation. We're rolling out the largest programme of tagging in our history. We're forcing offenders to stay boxed in certain areas rather than where victims are. We're creating alcohol, pub, football and driving bans. We're implementing income reduction orders, and we're expanding chemical castration for sex offenders. None of it happened when they were in power.
James cleverly presses the government once again, demanding guarantees that serious offenders such as rapists and paedophiles will not be released early. He argues that even Labour MPs appear uncomfortable with the policy. David Lammy rejects those accusations and instead outlines additional investment in probation services, electronic tagging, offender restrictions and rehabilitation measures. His response shifts the debate from prisoner releases to the broader question of how offenders should be supervised once released.
Sir James Cleverly.
Mr. Speaker, he will look back on this exchange and I think he will be shocked by how this is coming across. No apology to the victims, no guarantee that paedophiles and rapists will not be released early. We all know that releasing dangerous criminals on purpose is the wrong thing. But not content with doing that, he is hell-bent on releasing dangerous criminals by accident. Yep. Last year, in response to the questions of my right honourable friend, the member for South Suffolk, he claimed that under Labour he had got a grip of accidental releases. Yet we now know there have been more accidental releases in the last 2 years than in the entirety of the last Parliament. So I give him another chance. Will he apologise to the country for his abject failure at keeping prisoners in prison where they belong?
I've got to say, this is rich coming from the honourable gentleman. They had 14 long years in power. They wrecked neighbourhood policing. He was Home Secretary. Prisons were at bursting point. That's why they called the general election. And they let out offenders in secret. And that is why we have the Sentencing Act that passed through this House and the House of Lords. What we're doing is we are getting thousands more bobbies on the beat. We're toughening up probation. They decimated it. And we have to have the space to knock up dangerous criminals. That's why we passed the sentencing bill.
Sir James Cleverly.
Mr. Speaker, it's the dangerous criminals that he is letting out early. So he refuses to apologise to victims, he refuses to guarantee that sexual offenders and rapists will not be released early. Another thing that the country and indeed this House knows instinctively is wrong is his personal crusade to scrap trial by jury. We know that it will not clear the backlog. We know that it undermines fundamental British freedoms, and we know the legal profession is united against it. So will he now admit that it is wrong, and will he commit to reverse his proposals to scrap trial by jury?
As the exchange continues, James cleverly broadens his criticism beyond prisoner releases, accusing Labour of weakening Britain's justice system and raising concerns about proposals affecting jury trials. David Lammy firmly rejects suggestions that trial by jury is being abolished, arguing that only procedural changes are under discussion. The disagreement highlights how PMQs often expands from one policy area into wider debates over government competence and public confidence.
Well, let's be clear, Mr. Speaker. There is no proposal before this House to scrap trial by jury. The honourable member needs to do better and get on the detail. There is a threshold change. There is a threshold change. Margaret Thatcher made a change to jury trials. David Cameron made a change to jury trials. The vast majority of criminal cases in this country are dealt with by magistrates, again, which they cut. We're restoring the magistrate, and they can do more. We're investing in our courts. They ran our courts down. We're modernising our courts. We're introducing digital ID, and we need reform.
Sir James Cleverly.
Mr. Speaker, he talks in glowing terms about what he's claiming to do. What we are actually seeing this government doing is stripping money from where it's needed and squandering it on the welfare bill, which is ballooned by £20 billion this year alone. And he talks about getting over the detail. Here's a simple detail for him. When I was Home Secretary, we had more police officers than at any point in British history. Since taking over, that number has dropped by over 2,000 officers. Mr. Speaker, at the dispatch box last week, my right honourable friend, the Leader of the Opposition, highlighted this government's failure to defend us internationally. Today, I have outlined his failure to defend us domestically. If the soon-to-be Prime Minister... Is he in the room anywhere? No. If the soon-to-be Prime Minister does not want to be complicit in his failure, he should come out and condemn this plan, not just hint that he opposes it. Because if Labour cannot protect the citizens of this country, either domestically or internationally, then what on earth is the point of them?
The final exchanges become increasingly political as James cleverly criticises Labour over policing, welfare spending and public services, while urging the incoming Prime Minister to distance himself from current government policies. David Lammy responds with a direct comparison between Labour's first 2 years in office and the Conservatives' 14 years in government, arguing that Labour has improved workers' rights, reduced NHS waiting lists, strengthened defence spending, and delivered reforms across the justice system. The debate ends with both sides presenting sharply contrasting records for voters to judge.
Mr. Speaker, he insists on proving that he can't count. We lost 16,000 police officers when they were in power. Mr. Speaker, the British people haven't forgotten what the party opposite did to our country. After 2 years of a Labour government, I'll compare our record every day of the week. Their record is the biggest fall in living standards in recorded history. Our record is the biggest upgrade to workers' rights in a generation. Their record is wrecking our criminal justice system. Our record is bringing down violent crime. Their record is millions of people stuck on NHS waiting lists. Our record is cutting NHS waiting lists, the fastest rate in history. Their record is cutting defence. He was a reservist. They hollowed out the armed forces. Our record is the biggest boost to defence spending since the early 1990s. And their record is plunging hundreds of thousands of children into poverty. Our record is lifting 500,000 of children out of poverty. I'll take our record over theirs any day of the week.
Today's Prime Minister's questions highlighted one of the most sensitive issues facing any government: how to balance public safety with the growing pressure on Britain's prison system. James cleverly focused his questions on Labour's early prisoner release policy, arguing that releasing serious offenders too soon risks undermining public confidence and causing further distress to victims. By quoting the testimony of a grooming gang survivor, he sought to emphasise the human impact of the government's decisions and repeatedly challenged David Lammy to apologise and provide stronger guarantees about who would be released. David Lammy, however, presented a very different argument. He insisted that Labour inherited a prison estate operating at breaking point after years of Conservative government, and argued that emergency measures were unavoidable. Throughout the debate, he defended the government's approach by pointing to new prison places, increased investment in probation services, expanded electronic monitoring, and reforms aimed at improving public protection. Rather than accepting responsibility for the current crisis, Lammy argued that many of today's problems were the result of long-term decisions made by previous governments. As is often the case during Prime Minister's questions, both sides used the debate to present sharply contrasting narratives. The opposition argued that Labour's policies are weakening public safety, while the government insisted it is repairing a justice system left under severe pressure. Ultimately, it is for Parliament and the public to assess which argument they find more convincing. Now, we'd like to hear your opinion. Do you believe Labour's early prisoner release policy is a necessary response to prison overcrowding, or do you think public safety should take priority even if it means expanding prison capacity more quickly? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We always welcome respectful debate from all viewpoints. If you enjoyed this analysis, please like this video, subscribe to Britain Talks Daily, and turn on notifications so you never miss our coverage of PMQs, Westminster debates, House of Commons exchanges, and the biggest stories in UK politics. Thanks for watching Britain Talks Daily. We'll see you in the next analysis.